You're welcome back. Global tensions are rising again, this time around Iran, the United States, and Israel. The headlines may look far away, but for Nigeria, this is not distant news. Whenever there is instability in the Middle East, oil prices react. And when oil prices react, Nigeria feels it from government revenue to fuel prices to the cost of food and transportation. So the real questions today is not just about diplomacy or nuclear politics. The real question is, what does this mean for Nigeria? Will oil prices rise or fall? Will this strengthen or weaken our economy? And how should Nigeria position itself in the shifting global order? Joining me to make sense of this is Afia TV's director, head of anything that you could think of, Mr. Nnamdi Omaya. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, a lot of people listening right now don't know that there is a war ongoing. And for a lot of people who know, they don't know what the war between Iran, the United States, and Israel is all about. So just give us a backstory. What is this war about? I know it spans decades, but...
Actually, there are two wars because just before this, Pakistan and Afghanistan engaged.
Yes.
So there's actually another conflict. But it's been a long-standing Cold War. It's been there long before. Iran was a democracy. It was rumored that they wanted to nationalize their oil. So the CIA imposed the Shah of Iran. Of course, at the end of the 1970s, Ayatollah Khomeini came in. And, that was when we had the Iranian hostage crisis, which led to the Reagan presidency, which forced Jimmy Carter out. So there's always been tension. Then it became the Islamic Republic of Iran. Police, everything replaced with the Irani Islamic Revolutionary Guard, which is more or less Hizbah Pro-Max. So for a long time, you've had the actual Iranian Christians and Zoroastrians who complain that, what they have is an occupying government, Islamic occupying government. And there are those who are also Islamic fundamentalists who say, the Iranic Islamic Council is the legitimate government. But I don't want to think that this has anything to do with religion, because you've seen Iran fire missiles into Bahrain, UAE, Kuwait, where they killed some American people. You must also understand that Iran is a Shiite Muslim country, and the rest of them, apart from Iraq, where they've had massive protests, are Sunni Muslims. You have Bahrain. Bahrain is majority Shiite, even though they have a Sunni minority leadership. So it's more complicated than people think. What the US is doing is like what happened in Venezuela.
Okay.
They are weakening opposition access to oil. You must understand that the Arabian Gulf,
Yes.
has one of the most important, oil exporting infrastructure. And then you have the Strait of Hormuz. Now, the Strait of Hormuz is critical. To the north of it is Iran, and to the south of it is Oman. But all the oil that comes out of the Gulf, most of the oil that comes out of the Gulf, comes out through the Strait of Hormuz. It's a very important choke point for global trade. Now, Saudi Arabia, I think Kuwait, UAE, they have alternative pipelines, but this can only do about 1/3 of their oil. And the rest of the oil of the Gulf is trapped in the Arabian Gulf, the Persian Gulf, if the Strait of Hormuz is blocked. So the US has closed that choke point. It's a very important thing. About 1/5 of the world's global oil comes from there. That's about 20 million barrels a day is blocked once the US blocks off there. China gets majority of the oil from there, but not just them. You have about 3/4 of Japanese oil comes from there. About 60% of South Korea's oil comes from there. So South Korea, Japan are allies with the US. I don't think they will have issues with getting oil. But the so-called shadow ships, which is what is used to move majority of China's oil that comes from the Gulf, which would have been ramped up with the blockade of Venezuela, it has now been blocked off. Basically, the US is starving China of oil resources. And if you understand the military actions or any military strategy, fueling your military is very important.
Okay.
And at this point in time, you have the US looking at the Taiwan situation. China cannot have a prolonged altercation with Taiwan if they don't have enough energy. Don't forget that if you're going to fuel tanks, boats, vehicles, generators, everything you need for an invasion. So basically what the US is doing is US is reordering the global oil supply. This could also be a reaction to BRICS saying that they do not want to trade in the petrodollar anymore.
Okay.
Most people will tell you that, the dollar is no longer backed by gold, but backed by the petrodollar. And that is a very important means of how the dollar keeps its value. So if the BRICS threat came true, you would have an issue. So now you now have China, which is like the, would I say, the economic powerhouse of BRICS. US is tying them up. Already, the military might of BRICS, Russia, is tied up in the Ukraine conflict and diplomacy with America. South Africa, really more of the last born in it. Brazil, having its own internal issues between their socialist and Republican tussles on the two sides of the political aisle. And then you have India, whose PM Modi is a good friend of Trump and will not want to get too involved in this.
Okay.
Then you have Israel, who is in it for their own protection. You know, the Iranian chant has always been death to Israel, death to America.
Yes.
Israel considers Iran an existential threat. In fact, it was rumored that if the US did not engage, Israel were going to use nuclear weapons to flatten Iran's nuclear capabilities. The current American government blames the Obama administration, who ferried Iran cash and took a step back on allowing them to enrich uranium, which could either be used for nuclear power or used for nuclear weapons. So now Iran has been enriching uranium. They got that flood of cash from the Obama administration. So now the Trump administration is trying to, reverse that situation. And at the same time, more importantly for them, they put all the cards to see if it's worth it.
Okay.
We're going to, destabilize China's oil flow. We're going to reverse the policy with regards to Iran having nuclear weapons. And at the same time, we're going to continue reordering the trade cycle in the world.
Yeah, is it not quite surprising? We have not heard from China and Russia, close allies of Iran. But let's get to what Donald Trump said yesterday. He said that the reason for the war was just a change of regime. Do you believe that?
It's a summary. Change of regime is a summary. So the Trump administration, that change of regime might be a bit tricky because they have a non-interventionist policy with regards to choosing the leader. Trump, if you watched the rest of it, was saying the people need to rise up and choose
overthrow the government
and choose their new leader.
Yeah.
That they are not going to. The government is basically overthrown. What you have are fragments of the Islamic Republic Guard and fragments of those who were left alive after the attack on the meeting. And so the US is telling the people, build your government before these guys rebuild themselves.
But is it not funny that he didn't make plans for that, a new leader to put in place? Because I was thinking, they wanted a person of their own there, because for 37 years, it's not been their president.
He has always from the beginning held that they would not impose leadership on anybody. Though, of course, that's not possible 100%. The choice of leadership will be. So what will happen now is, as he has said this, the people will feel emboldened to pick somebody. There's also the chance that right now, Iranians who have been in exile for a long time, powerful Iranians all over the world, most powerful of them being one of the bloggers, people say, one of the podcasters, millionaire businessman Patrick Bet-David, who is a Trump confidant. These are people that could either be put as new presidents or could have influence on who the new president is. So at the same time, Ayatollah Khomeini's son, grandson, who is a candidate, and Khamenei's son, who is also a candidate, along with the Minister for Justice, who is also a candidate. All these guys that be thinking, okay, if we can present ourselves as US friendly, maybe we'll be left to run the government. So what is happening is a lot of jockeying for who can be friendlier to the US. But right now, the US has already achieved what it wants. Yes, Iran is talking tough. The Minister of Defense saying they will keep striking. Defense systems in Kuwait, UAE, stopping most of the air missiles. They have a good air defense systems. Yes. Same thing with Israel. Even though if you get through, we know that 3 servicemen posted in Ukraine were killed and some others were injured.
Yeah.
So, but that's because for every 130, 136, 3 might get through. So there's that. But right now, first achievement, Strait of Hormuz is blocked off. Global shipping, China shipping blocked off. Saudi, UAE cannot use pipelines to supply China. They will supply their other European countries. US is watching carefully. The main ships that come through the Strait of Hormuz from the Persian Gulf blocked off. So we can expect global prices will increase, but not significantly as people think. Because even Venezuela, who is a large producer, when the US gave them their blockade, it didn't really throw the oil market into a frenzy. And the reason is this: just like the nonsense we see in Nigeria, a lot of crude from a lot of these countries is used to pay debts borrowed from China. So already it was not pumping into the main global stream. Now, what could be affected is the rest of the oil coming out of the Gulf. Now, there might be some, will I say, considerations. You could have registered ships from Saudi Arabia, UAE, Kuwait, Oman, Bahrain, Qatar, that may be allowed to come through, So you may not really hinder the supply of oil from the Gulf. So if the price goes up, it may not go up, and if it does, it may not stay up for long. Okay. With regards to Nigeria, one will think that this is a time to do three things. One, increase our local reserves. Two, increase our local value. Take advantage of it and tell anybody we're paying with crude oil, come and get now or don't come later, because this is the time to offset your debts when your crude is at the highest price. And three, also remove some of it that would make local production very, very cheap. You have, instead of subsidize, don't subsidize fuel. Take out a quota and give to Dangote and Co to refine locally so that you can meet up with some local demand and, mitigate what will be a lot of, because the truth is a lot of the imported fuel is coming from Nigeria, is exported and re-imported. So this is the time for us to even take advantage and even become regional, a regional powerhouse, even though, of course, infrastructure leaves a lot to be desired, but we can be strategic about it.
Yeah, because I was going to mention that OPEC had an emergency meeting amidst the crisis yesterday, and they increased the production of oil to 260 barrels per day. How does this affect us in the long run? See, we have not reached our OPEC quota in a while now.
Yeah, I was going to say that, them talking about 260 million barrels a day, Nigeria's quota is usually somewhere between 1.5 and 1.5, 1.8. We never hit it. In fact, there was actually a time I was following a trend of about 4 years where if you look at the trend line of oil price rising and dipping, Nigeria's graph was doing the opposite. Whenever oil prices were at the highest, our production was at its lowest, and vice versa. Yeah. So we always seem to miss the curve. We're not producing a lot when the price is high, and we are producing a lot when the price is low.
Meaning we're not gaining anything.
We're not gaining anything. We're basically undervaluing ourselves. For a country that has, for how many years now had oil, 60 plus years, enjoyed an oil boom. We are pretty incompetent at managing our resources.
Okay. So if oil prices are going up because of this conflict, how would this affect the price of fuel here in Nigeria?
Again, like I said, except our government acts, it will affect, because even I remember Dangote, them telling Dangote they're going to sell to him at global price. There's no consideration made for local production as an oil producing country. We're very silly about it. We keep towing the line and listening to the IMF, World Bank, and people who have their own interest at heart, not ours. But then again, I can't really say our own government has our interest at heart. So they're more likely to follow those people. So yes, expect some increase in the fuel price. Okay. Expect the spokespeople for the president, Bayo Onanuga and Co, to tell you that it's higher in other places. And certainly about the price of places where the hourly minimum wage is the monthly minimum wage in Nigeria, to tell you that those places are high. So you should be grateful that the government is not making it as high as that. Expect that kind of gaslighting. But yeah, expect the price to go up, though I don't think it will stay up for long. Okay. One, the region is very afraid of a prolonged conflict. And two, a lot of the, seized oil is going to be thrown back into the mix and sold, by America and other people. I think what OPEC should be thinking of at the emergency meeting is how to meet America and ask to become bulk purchasers of any seized Iranian oil and give guarantees that it will not be sold to hostile people or proxies, but that it will be well documented and sold. I think that way you would avoid a global oil spike that could actually ruin a lot of countries as a whole, especially those that depend on logistics. Because once the price goes up, diesel for ships, diesel to run ports, diesel to run heavy industry, all those things will be seriously affected. Okay,
so yesterday we saw Northerners here in Nigeria from the northern region protesting about this. What does this have to do with Nigeria? Is there religious implications of the conflict here in Nigeria?
So it's a multi-layered structure of stupid hypocrisy or hypocritic stupidity, whichever one you choose. Number one, Nigeria is majority a Sunni Muslim country. This is the same country where we saw a Sunni Muslim government of Buhari deal very badly with El Zakzaki and the Shiite Muslims. And we saw the Muslims in Nigeria keep quiet because it's a Sunni Shiite issue. All of a sudden, they have found their voices to protest for a Shiite Muslim nation that is firing missiles at other Sunni Muslim countries. Saudi Arabia, the holy land where they all go to, is against Iran. And Saudi Arabia is where Mecca and Medina, where all of them go to pilgrimage for, sometimes, and most times, even at the expense of the Nigerian taxpayer. But you see, because of, well, I call it terrorist ideology similarities, Iran is greatly involved in groups like Hezbollah, Al Qaeda, and all that. Yeah, the problem America has always had with Iran is it had made itself a proper financier and armorer of separatist and non-state actors. So the Nigerians shouting for Iran, they are just being misled and trying to be silly. And why I say it's multi-layered is because, like I mentioned, Iran is Shiite, they're majorly Sunni. Iran is not even in the good books of the Sunni Muslims, including Saudi Arabia in the Gulf, And then you would think that with all the killing and terrorism in Nigeria, that they would be protesting that. You would think the killing of people, the flogging of coppers, the murdering of priests, the wiping of villages, the killing of people in Kwara, Undo, Benue, Katsina, you would think that would be worth ranting for, but no. If it's not Palestine, it's Iran.
So it's misplaced priorities at
the
end of the day.
It's misled illiterates. It's, how I said we weaponize poverty in Nigeria. This is the weaponization of Almajiri Pro Max. So I'm sorry, it might sound offensive, but I think it's grossly stupid that with everything happening in Nigeria, protests for Iran, it just tells you that it's sponsored by some organization. Okay. And we know how linked they are via Algeria, Iran, Algeria. The terrorist networks from the ISIL, that's in the Levant, ISIS and Al Qaeda, who operate in North Africa and still from the Levant region down to Nigeria. So it's this sympathy is not coming from a good place. Okay. And that's the truth of the matter.
I think I don't know if it's about time we start having this conversation about nuclear weapons. And also Nigeria, as a member of the United Nations, should they stand on the question of nuclear sovereignty and for independent nations to develop and own nuclear weapons? Are we in that space now? Are we capable of doing something like that?
Nigeria has not even been able to enrich uranium to develop nuclear power, despite northern Nigeria and Niger having most of the world's uranium deposits. So I think for weapons, with a country that has a very strong terrorist presence, I wouldn't advise Nigeria have a nuclear weapon. A nuclear weapon in Nigeria is basically handing a nuclear weapon to Al Qaeda, because Nigeria is that country. There are no guardrails, there are no checks and balances, and this is a country where we are being told that Boko Haram are our brothers. So we should not even, if they want to give the whole world nuclear sovereignty, they should not give Nigeria. Nigeria should never be allowed. And if we're going to use nuclear power, the enrichment must be 100% controlled by an external league of enforcers and not internally. Because I guarantee you, this country, people will still steal the uranium and give it to terrorists to create weapons. So no, nuclear sovereignty, I'm not a big fan of it. Unfortunately, some countries already have. I think there should be nuclear weapons, but just like the US has checks and balances to launch theirs, Russia, if you look at countries like the US, there are a series of checks before the president can launch a nuclear weapon. Russia is less guarded. North Korea is basically if Kim Jong-un feels like. Okay. The same with China. Yeah. So you have to be careful who has nuclear weapons. And I think that what should happen is that there should be weapons, but there should be guardrails on how they can be used. Maybe even multi-country guardrails. Maybe even if you have like NATO or alliances, that maybe people from, because trusting somebody's goodwill to use nuclear weapons when you don't have, I come to negotiate with you, have nuclear weapons you don't have. That's not a negotiation. That's begging.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Nnamdi. He is the General Manager at Afia TV. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's it for the Eastern Business Report today. And the Afia Business Morning returns tomorrow. Thank you very much for staying with us. My name is Nnamdi. Bye for now.